The twins saw her first, two identical faces pressed against the fence rail like matching bookends, dirt on their cheeks and curiosity bright in their eyes. Eleanor Crowley stepped down from the wagon with her single worn trunk, dust settling around her boots, and met the stares of everyone gathered in the yard of the Mercer ranch. She was 20 years old, bought for $300, and a promise her father wouldn't drink himself to death before winter. The shame of it burned hotter than the afternoon sun beating down on her neck. "You the mail-order woman," one of the twins called out, his voice high and unguarded. "Hush now, Jacob," came a deeper voice, and Eleanor looked up to see the man who'd purchased her future walking across the yard. Samuel Mercer was older than she'd imagined from the single letter her father had read aloud, maybe 35, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He stopped a respectful distance away and removed his hat, revealing eyes the color of creek water in spring. "Miss Crowley, I hope the journey wasn't too rough." Eleanor wanted to laugh at the question, at the politeness of it, when they both knew what she was. Instead, she nodded. "It was fine, Mr. Mercer." "Sam," he corrected, then gestured toward the house. "Come on, I'll show you around." The ranch sprawled across a valley between two ridges, with a main house that had seen better days and outbuildings scattered like dice across packed earth. Chickens pecked near the barn. A dog lay in the shade of the porch, too hot to bother lifting its head. The twins had abandoned the fence and now trailed behind Eleanor and Sam, whispering to each other in a language only brothers could understand. "Those are my nephews," Sam explained, glancing back at the boys. "Jacob and James. Their ma, my sister, passed 2 winters back. Fever. Their pa didn't last the following spring. Just couldn't go on without her, I suppose." Eleanor heard the weight in his words, the way grief could sink into a person and never quite let go. She knew that feeling. Her own mother had been gone 6 years, and her father had been disappearing piece by piece ever since, one bottle at a time. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Sam nodded, his jaw tight. "They need a woman's hand. I've done my best, but I don't know how to raise boys proper, how to give them what they need." He stopped at the porch steps, turned to face her fully. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know your father needed money and I needed help, but I promise you'll be treated with respect under this roof. You'll have your own room. The boys are good kids, just wild, and I'm not expecting." He trailed off, color rising in his face, and Eleanor understood. No wedding night. No claim on her body just because he'd paid for the right to her presence. Relief and something else, something she couldn't quite name, twisted together in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," Sam replied, a hint of humor touching his mouth. "You haven't met the goat." The first week passed in a blur of learning. Eleanor rose before dawn to start the stove, cooked meals for 4 instead of 2, mended shirts that had been neglected for months, and tried to ignore the way the twins watched her like she might vanish if they blinked. They were 8 years old, identical down to the cowlick in their dark hair, and they moved through the world with the careless energy of boys who'd been allowed to run half wild. Jacob was the talker, full of questions and stories that tumbled out faster than Eleanor could follow. James was quieter, more watchful, but when he smiled, it was like sun breaking through clouds. They both had their uncle's eyes, that same creekwater green, and they both tested her patience in ways she hadn't expected. "Why'd you come here?" Jacob asked one morning while Eleanor kneaded bread dough at the kitchen table. James sat beside him, working on a drawing with a stub of pencil. "Your uncle needed help," Eleanor said, which was true enough without being the whole truth. "You need money," Jacob pressed. "Is that why your pa sold you?" "Jacob," Sam's voice came from the doorway, sharp with warning. He'd come in from the barn without Eleanor noticing, his shirt dark with sweat and his expression harder than she'd seen it. "That's not how we talk." "But that's what happened," Jacob said, confused. "I heard you tell Mr. Brennan in town that you paid." "Outside, both of you." Sam pointed toward the door, and the twins scrambled down from their chairs, shooting worried glances at Eleanor before disappearing into the yard. Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the crackle of wood in the stove. Eleanor kept kneading, her hands working the dough with steady pressure even as her throat tightened. "I'm sorry," Sam said finally, Kids don't know when to keep their mouths shut. He's not wrong. Elena shaped the dough into a ball, set it in the bowl to rise. My father did sell me $300 to clear his debts and keep him in whiskey through the winter. That's the truth of it. That's not. Sam moved closer, stopped at the edge of the table. You're not property, Elena. I didn't buy you. I paid your passage here and gave your father money to help him through hard times. That's all. Is it? Elena met his eyes, saw him flinch. Because it feels like being bought. It feels like I don't have any choice about where I am or what I'm doing or who I. She stopped herself, turned away to cover the bowl with a cloth. Her hands were shaking. Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. You can leave anytime. I won't stop you. There's a stagecoach through Harper's Bend twice a month. I'll give you money for a ticket if that's what you want. Elena pressed her palms flat against the table, closed her eyes. Where would she go? Back to her father's house, to watch him drink himself into the ground, to some other town where she'd be the woman too poor to keep her own fate in her hands. At least here the twins needed her. At least here Sam Mercer looked at her like she was a person instead of a burden or a transaction. I'll stay, she said. She heard him exhale. All right then. By the second week, Elena had fallen into a rhythm. She woke to darkness and the distant sound of Sam moving around the barn, started coffee that would be strong and bitter the way he liked it, and had breakfast ready by the time the twins stumbled out of their shared bedroom with sleep-creased faces. After the morning meal, Sam would disappear into the work of running a ranch, fixing fences, tending cattle, hauling water, the endless labor that kept a place alive, while Elena cleaned and cooked and tried to teach the twins their letters. They were smart boys, quick to learn when they focused, but they'd been without schooling for too long. Elena found old primers in a trunk and worked with them at the kitchen table, praising James when he sounded out a word correctly and nudging Jacob back to his slate when his attention wandered to the window. Do you know how to read good? James asked one afternoon, his pencil hovering over a page. Well, Elena corrected gently, read well, and yes, I do. Who taught you? My mother, she was a teacher before she married my father. Elena smiled at the memory, faint and bittersweet. She used to say education was the only thing no one could take from you. Jacob looked up from where he'd been half-heartedly copying letters. Did your pa take it? No, Elena reached over to fix the way he was holding his pencil, but he took almost everything else. The twins exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them, and then James said, Our ma used to read to us before she got sick. She did. What did she read? Stories, Jacob said, about knights and dragons and ladies in towers. They were good stories. I bet they were. Elena stood, brushed chalk dust from her hands. Tell you what, if you both finish your lessons without complaining for the rest of the week, I'll read to you at bedtime. I saw some books on the shelf in the main room. Maybe we can find a good one. The change in them was immediate. Jacob bent over his slate with sudden focus, and James's tongue poked out in concentration as he worked. Elena hid her smile and went to start supper, something warm blooming in her chest that felt dangerously close to belonging. That night, after the twins were in bed and the dishes were washed, Elena sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling. Crickets sang in the grass. The horses shifted in the barn. Somewhere far off, a coyote called out to the stars. The door opened behind her, and Sam stepped out, carrying his own cup. Mind if I sit? It's your porch. It's yours too. He settled into the chair beside her, stretched his legs out with a tired sigh. I heard you made a deal with the boys, reading at bedtime. They're good kids. They just need something to look forward to. They need more than that. Sam was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the horizon where the last light was fading. They need a mother, not just someone to cook and clean, someone to love them. Elena's throat tightened. I can't be their mother, Sam, I'm just. I know I'm not asking that. He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the dim light. But they already care about you, I can see it, and I think maybe you care about them too. She did, that was the terrifying part. In 2 weeks, the twins had worked their way under her skin with their questions and their laughter and their need. She caught herself listening for their voices, worrying when they climbed too high in the oak tree, feeling proud when they mastered a new word. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that could become love if she let it. What about you? The question slipped out before Eleanor could stop it. Do you care? Sam's eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat she saw something roar in them, something that made her breath catch. Yeah, he said quietly, I do. The moment stretched between them, full of things unspoken, and then Sam cleared his throat and looked away. Better get some sleep. Morning comes early. It does, Eleanor agreed, but neither of them moved. The turning point came in the 3rd week, on a Tuesday that started like any other. Eleanor was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, her hands red from the washboard and her back aching, when she heard hoofbeats. She turned to see 3 riders coming up the road, their horses moving at an easy lope. Something about the way they sat their saddles made unease prickle along her spine. Sam emerged from the barn, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. Go inside, he called to Eleanor, take the boys. But the twins were already running toward the riders, Jacob shouting a greeting, and Eleanor's heart jumped into her throat. She dropped the wet shirt she'd been holding and hurried after them, reaching the boys just as the riders pulled up in the yard. The man in front was older than Sam, with gray in his beard and cold eyes that swept over Eleanor like she was livestock. Well now, he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. This the new wife, Sam. This is Miss Crowley, Sam said, his tone flat. She's helping with the boys. Is that what we are calling it? The man swung down from his horse, moved closer. I heard you sent back east for a woman, must have been desperate to pay for company. Eleanor felt heat flood her face, shame and anger mixing together. The other 2 riders were watching with grins that made her skin crawl. State your business, Dalton, then get off my land. Sam stepped between Eleanor and the newcomer, his shoulders tense. Friendly as ever, Dalton's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm here about the water. That creek runs through my property too, and you've been taking more than your share. The creek's been running the same as always. Not according to my cattle. Dalton looked past Sam to Eleanor, his gaze lingering in a way that made her want to retreat into the house. Maybe you're using extra water for other things, washing up for your new lady friend. One of the twins, Jacob, stepped forward, his small hands balled into fists. You leave her alone. Jacob, Eleanor grabbed his shoulder, pulled him back against her. James was pressed to her other side, trembling with anger or fear or both. Dalton laughed. Got yourself some protectors, I see, that's sweet. He turned his attention back to Sam. I'll be watching the creek. If I catch you taking more than your fair share, we'll have a different kind of conversation. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Dalton climbed back onto his horse, gathered the reins. You have a good day now, Sam, Miss Crowley. He tipped his hat to Eleanor with mock courtesy, then wheeled his horse and rode out with his men behind him. Sam stood rigid until the riders disappeared from sight, then let out a long breath. Boys, go check on the chickens. But Uncle Sam. No. The twins reluctantly obeyed, casting worried looks at Eleanor as they went. She watched them go, her heart still racing, her hands still gripping the fabric of her skirt. Who was that? She asked. Trouble? Sam turned to face her, his expression grim. Dalton owns the ranch north of here. He's been trying to buy me out for years. I won't sell, so he looks for other ways to make life difficult. What did he mean about the water? There's a creek that runs between our properties. We've always shared it without issue, but now he's claiming I'm taking too much. Sam rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. It's an excuse. He wants me gone. Eleanor thought about the way Dalton had looked at her, the weight of his gaze and the meaning behind his words. He knows about me, about how I came here. Everyone knows. Small towns don't keep secrets. Sam's jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I should have thought about that before I sent for you, should have considered what people would say. I don't care what they say. You should, Sam met her eyes, something fierce in his expression. You should care, because you deserve better than being looked at like I was bought. Elena lifted her chin. That's what happened, Sam. We can dress it up with different words, but the truth is the truth. My father needed money, and you needed help, and here I am. You're more than that. Sam took a step closer, his voice dropping. You're more than some transaction. You've brought life back to this place. The boys are happier than I've seen them in 2 years. He stopped himself, shook his head. You matter, Elena. Don't let men like Dalton make you think otherwise. Something cracked open in Elena's chest, some wall she'd been carefully maintaining. Sam. A shout from the barn cut her off. They both turned to see James running toward them, his face pale. Uncle Sam, the goat's out and Jacob's trying to catch him. Sam swore under his breath and jogged toward the barn. Elena followed, lifting her skirts to keep from tripping, and found chaos unfolding in the paddock. The goat, a stubborn creature Sam had won in a card game and immediately regretted, was leading Jacob on a wild chase around the fence line while chickens scattered in every direction. Jacob Mercer, you stop running, Elena called, but the boy didn't listen. He lunged for the goat, missed, and went sprawling in the dirt. Sam vaulted the fence and scooped up his nephew before the goat could headbutt him. The animal, satisfied with the mayhem it had caused, trotted calmly back to its pen like nothing had happened. Elena found herself laughing despite everything, despite Dalton and his threats, despite the fear still humming under her skin. The absurdity of it all was too much. Sam looked at her over Jacob's head, dirt on his shirt and exasperation on his face, and then he was laughing too. The sound of it was rusty, like he hadn't laughed in a long time, and it made Elena's heart do something complicated and unexpected. Maybe this was enough. Maybe this strange, cobbled-together family could be enough. That night, Elena kept her promise and read to the twins. They crowded onto James's bed, one on either side of her, and she opened a battered copy of Treasure Island that had been sitting on the shelf. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory as she read about Jim Hawkins and pirates and adventure on the high seas, and the boys listened with rapt attention until their eyes grew heavy. Will you read more tomorrow? James asked as she tucked the blanket around him. If you do your lessons. We will, Jacob promised from his bed across the room. Elena. Yes. I'm glad Uncle Sam brought you here. Elena's eyes strung. Me too, she said, and realized it was true. She stepped out into the hallway and nearly collided with Sam, who'd been standing just outside the door. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, and they stood close enough that she could smell soap and leather and something earthy that was just him. Sorry, he murmured. I was just listening. It's all right. He didn't let go of her arm. His thumb brushed against the inside of her elbow, a touch so light she might have imagined it. Elena, I need to tell you something. Her pulse kicked up. What? If Dalton causes trouble, real trouble, I need you to take the boys and go. There's money in the tin on the top shelf in the kitchen, enough for 3 tickets east and then some. Promise me you'll keep them safe. Sam, what are you talking about? Just promise me. Elena searched his face, saw the fear there beneath the determination. I promise, but you're going to be fine. We all are. I hope you're right. He released her arm and stepped back, and Elena felt the absence of his touch, like cold water. The trouble came 4 days later in the form of smoke on the horizon. Elena saw it from the kitchen window while she was making dinner, a dark plume rising from the direction of the creek. Sam and the boys were in the barn, and she ran out to find them, her heart hammering. Sam, fire. He appeared in the barn doorway, saw the smoke, and his face went hard. Stay here with the boys, lock the doors, don't open them unless you hear my voice. What are you going to do? What I have to. He saddled his horse with quick efficiency, checked his gun, and rode out before Elena could argue. She herded the twins into the house, locked the door like Sam had ordered, and tried to keep her hands from shaking as she watched the smoke grow darker. The boys were scared, she could see it in their faces, but they trusted her to keep them safe. That trust was a weight and a gift all at once. An hour passed. The smoke began to thin. Eleanor paced the kitchen, started to pray, stopped because she didn't know who she was praying to. Then she heard hoofbeats, multiple horses, and her stomach dropped. "Stay here," she told the twins, and grabbed the rifle from above the door. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she'd watched her father clean his often enough. Her hands were steady as she positioned herself by the window, the rifle heavy and cold. But it was Sam who rode into the yard, followed by 3 men Eleanor recognized from town, neighbors who'd come to help fight the fire. They were all blackened with soot, exhausted, but alive. Sam swung down from his horse and caught sight of Eleanor in the window with the rifle. Something like pride flashed across his face. She set the gun down and opened the door. "Is it out?" "It's out." Sam's voice was rough with smoke. "Someone set fire to the grass near the creek. If we hadn't caught it when we did, it would have spread to the ranch." "Dalton." "Probably can't prove it." Sam nodded to the neighbors. "Thank you, I won't forget this." The men tipped their hats and rode off. Sam climbed the porch steps slowly, like every muscle ached, and Eleanor reached for him without thinking. Her hands found his face, checking for injuries, and his hands came up to circle her wrists. "I'm all right," he said. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." His thumbs stroked the inside of her wrists, his eyes searching hers. "You would have protected them, wouldn't you, the boys?" "With my life." "I know." Sam pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers. "Eleanor, Uncle Sam." Jacob burst through the door, James right behind him, and they crashed into Sam's legs. He staggered, caught them both, and Eleanor stepped back to give them room. Her wrists felt cold where his hands had been. That night, after the twins were asleep, and Sam had washed the smoke from his skin, Eleanor found him on the porch again. She sat beside him without asking permission and watched the stars appear one by one. "This isn't going to stop," Sam said quietly. "Dalton won't give up." "Then we'll deal with it." He turned to look at her. Eleanor met his gaze. "Yes, I'm not leaving, Sam, not unless you tell me to go." "I won't." His hand found hers on the arm of the chair, laced their fingers together. "I won't tell you to go, not ever." "Good." Eleanor squeezed his hand, felt the calluses on his palm and the strength in his grip. "Because I think I'm home." They sat like that until the moon rose, hands clasped and shoulders touching, and Eleanor felt something settle deep in her bones. This wasn't the life she'd imagined. It wasn't the story she'd thought she'd live. But maybe it was better, rougher and more real, and full of people who needed her as much as she needed them. The twins had softened her new life, and so had Sam Mercer, with his quiet kindness and his sad green eyes and his promise to treat her like she mattered. She'd been sold at 20 to a man she'd never met, but somehow she'd ended up here, in this moment, and it felt like the beginning of something worth staying for. "Eleanor," Sam's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." "Thank you for staying, for caring about them, for," he paused, swallowed, "for caring about me too." "You make it easy," she said, and meant it. They stayed on the porch until the night grew cold, and when they finally went inside it was together, side by side, 2 people finding their way towards something that looked like family. The ranch was quiet around them, and in their beds, the twins dreamed of pirates and adventure and the woman who read them stories. And somewhere in the darkness, Eleanor Crowley let herself believe that maybe being bought had led her exactly where she was meant to be.